What molds into silly animals and silly shapes?
Silly putty.
What bounces like a ball?
Silly putty.
What stretches and stretches?
Silly putty.
What picks up pictures from a newspaper and makes them silly? And if you stretch it, even sillier.
Silly putty.
Are you sure Silly Putty can do all those things?
Yes, silly putty is fun.
Silly Putty comes in a shell shaped like an egg. Nothing else is Silly Putty.
So what the heck even is Silly Putty, and who came up with this stuff? In 1943, in the middle of World War II, engineers working at General Electric were looking for an alternative to natural rubber because Japan controlled all of that resource. In looking for this recipe for synthetic rubber, chemist James Wright stumbled upon this strange concoction, a stretchy material that withstood decay and bounced 25% higher than rubber. The substance he described as a solid liquid, and he could not figure out a use for it at the time. It was chalked up as kind of a novelty. And then it was turned into a toy.
Hello there.
What a Chad.
You know, I've been all around this wonderful world of ours, and in all of this world, nothing else is silly putty.
Except for all this stuff.
What is silly putty? Well, it's a real solid liquid. If you pull it so, it'll go forever, like taffy. But if you give it a sharp tug, it'll break like a biscuit. Now, when you make silly putty round and drop it, it'll bounce higher than a rubber ball. And here's something else you can do with silly putty. Flatten it, press a picture in your newspaper, lift it.
Don't worry, it won't pull paint off your models.
Stretch it this way and that, and you'll get something that's really funny. Always put your silly putty back in its egg, or it will run slowly away. You can buy silly putty for $1 wherever toys are sold. And remember, nothing else is silly putty.
Except for all these. These are all just silly putty. You can pay the premium hobby tax to get black putty that just won't look gross when you get paint all over it. You can get a tin of the pretty looking stuff. Or even magnetic putty if you want. It's all the same stuff. And I found the OG silly putty for as cheap as $1.13. Isn't that 13 cents more than the dude said it was in 1957?
You can buy silly putty for $1 wherever toys are sold.
Listen to Captain Smokering. Don't pay more for your silly putty. What about the chemistry of silly putty? How does it do what it does? Let me give you a very brief overview without getting too deep in the weeds here. Silly putty is a non-Newtonian liquid. Okay, great, but what's a Newtonian liquid? Well, that's the stuff that you generally associate with liquids. Things like water, gasoline, gamer tears when we get one-shotted. Non-Newtonian fluids behave differently when forces are applied to them. Some of these are really bizarre, like silly putty or oobleck. Others are much more mundane and familiar to us. Hobby materials like glue and paint, asphalt, even ketchup. Non-Newtonian fluids is basically a catch-all category for any liquid that doesn't behave according to the normal rules. So what makes silly putty so weird? Silly putty's strange behavior comes down to its chemical structure. There are many components to silly putty, but the compound that is most important is polydimethyl siloxane, or PDMS. I built a model of PDMS in MolView, which is a great tool for chemistry students. On the left, you can see the structural formula. PDMS is a silicon polymer, which is basically a chain molecule. On the right, you can see a rough 3D visualization of what this looks like. The silicon atoms are bonded to an oxygen and to 2 or 3 methyl groups. Now, PDMS is viscoelastic. That means it acts like a viscous liquid and flows over long timescales. But in the short term, it's elastic. It can be stretched and bounced. But PDMS on its own does not explain silly putty's strange behavior entirely. The other element involved is boron. If you've played Fallout, you probably remember Abraxo cleaner. Well, that's just basically their version of borax, something that we mine for in the US Southwest. Well, boron gets involved with these polymer chains. The boron basically creates cross-links between sections of PDMS. You can think of these as like temporary bridges between the molecules. When force is applied, this causes these bridges to remain stable, which is what gives silly putty some of its weird properties. But when it's at rest, the bonds can break and reform and then break again, which is what causes silly putty to behave like a liquid sometimes.
And remember, nothing else is silly putty.